Hey, what's up? This is Miss Muhammad recording a live tutorial. Well, it's a live recording of me lesson planning. This video is being recorded for the purposes of providing some insight to one of my colleagues on my lesson planning practices and what it would look like for me to specifically design a lesson that is for an upcoming quarter 4. We're almost in the end of the year type of lesson plan. Our particular lesson plan that we're looking at is based on CCSD, so Clark County School District, their pacing guide for the 2024-2025 school year. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I'm going to first, before I get into the lesson planning practice, I do want to give myself a shout out here to my Etsy store, Zarina's Art. You can see the QR code up in the top corner. That will take you to my published book, It's Okay to Be Sad. So if you want to support me and support my channel and what I do, please do take a look at that product and other products that I'm offering, such as this feud speed round game, which can be used for teachers or otherwise other people who are just wanting to have some fun with their friends, people in professional industries who are looking for ways to motivate their employees and colleagues in fun, engaging ways. And it's a very inexpensive product. It's digital. You do what's it's a digital. Sorry, it's not digital necessarily. It's not online. It is a template to PowerPoint. So if you are a Microsoft PowerPoint user, you can have fun with this. If you don't know how to use Microsoft PowerPoint, then maybe it's not for you. All right, that's enough of that. Let's go ahead and jump into looking at some lesson planning stuff. So I pulled up right here the English department's summative assessment, which they turned in. And the reason I did this is because my colleague has mentioned that they're at the end of their Romeo and Juliet unit. And Juliet unit, they're at the end of their Romeo and Juliet unit and are preparing for their summative assessment. And they've been doing a note catcher, gathering evidence that they're going to use to write this summative assessment. So I wanted to take a look, and so I did pull it up just to see what was being assessed. And I can see right here one of the success criteria is I can write a multi-paragraph composition for a specific task, literary criticism, using evidence to build my argument while applying language to maintain a formal style. So for me, rather than trying to come up with new success criteria for my lesson plan, I might want to make sure I keep this one in mind. So I'm going to just copy it. I also opened our lesson planning template that we use at Cheyenne for this year. And it has in here some things. So it's going to be English, obviously, is the course. We don't have a meeting date here, but actually, you know what? This is the PLC planning document, and I should have just pulled up the lesson planning template. So I probably don't need some of these things. It looks like this part up here we wouldn't use. So I'm just going to delete that part. It would just be your lesson plan, really. So let me get rid of all of this. Delete this chart. Shoot. It just keeps on delete. I don't know. All right, we're not going to worry about that. I'm just going to go and start from right here, which would really be where the plan starts. So there's this greeting. And I just say something like, great kids as they come in, because that's the plan. And then introduction, it should be some type of warm-up. So I'm going to go ahead and just put warm-up here for me. And then what I would do is I like to have my warm-up connected to whatever we're doing. So before I get there, I'm going to go ahead and just go down to where it's the success criteria part. And I'm going to paste what I got from that summative just for now, so I can keep that in mind before I go further. And then I want to take a look at the pacing guide. So over here in the Canvas, there's the curriculum hub. So if you take a look at the curriculum hub, there's high school. We want to go there. And basically what I want to take a look at in the English language arts, and it's for grade 9, I want to take a look at the pacing guide to see what it says. So I'm going to pull this up, and I know they're in unit 4 down here. And in here, I can see this essential question: do we determine our own destinies? That's part of the question, but really, if we go further down here, we find that it says writing argument. There's this performance-based assessment, and I'm guessing this is what the performance assessment is for the summative over here in this particular one. Let me just take a look and see if they said. So they've already broken down in their planning some of the things. So learning progressions, understanding elements of literary criticism. I see right here, read and annotate and analyze Romeo and Juliet. Looking to see if they have the essay task. So I don't see the essay task necessarily on there. I see this right here that, I can write an engaging introduction, but I'm looking for the task itself. So I'm guessing they're getting their task right here from this performance rubric. And it is to write an argument in the form of short piece of literary criticisms that explores the selections in this unit, which is pretty much Romeo and Juliet. We're focused on that. And should the opinions of others affect our own choices or destinies? So write an argument is what they have to do. And they have to, so here's our standard. So going back to that pacing guide. Sorry, not pacing guide. Yeah, pacing guide. That's why I want to be back up here. Hang on. Well, I just left it, didn't I? They give you, so right here, they give you all these standards, right, that are basically what we should be teaching. And I believe right here, they already have their standards in their, right here, yeah. So they already have in the summative planning, they've got these standards. So write arguments to support claims and analysis of substantive topics using valid reasoning and relevant and sufficient evidence. And then down here, where there's this part with, we wanted to basically, oh, there it is. Draw evidence from literary or informational text to support analysis, reflection, and research. And that's really what they're going to be doing if you're looking at going to the, getting the evidence log together. So we want to go ahead and use this standard probably for our planning purposes. So I would take that and put it right in my planning document. So going up here to, where is that? You know what? Oh, there it is. Lesson objective. But I'm missing the right here. So here's what I like to do. In this area where it's lesson objective, I like to go ahead and actually include that objective right there, just like that. So I can see what it is we're going to be doing. So draw evidence from literary or informational text to support analysis, reflection, and research. We're working on that. But I would say we're also going to work on the whole idea of developing claims, because we're using this evidence to kind of develop those claims we're talking about. So, and it says supplying evidence for each. So let's go ahead and take that one, because we're going to do both of those things. So we're going to work on developing these claims, and we're also going to work on drawing that evidence, right? So in doing so, what we want to think about in planning like this lesson for using, we want kids to get this evidence onto their note catchers, but ultimately, we want to remember that they're trying to answer a specific question. So going back to that pacing guide, it looks like our lesson should be really helping them. Let me copy that I'm going to put in here, instead of this paragraph composition part, right, that says using evidence to build. So I'm going to take that out really and say that I can select. I'll say identify and select. Identify and select textual evidence from Romeo and Juliet to support my claim on the topic of, and now I'm going to take this out and instead paste. I'll say instead of topic, I'll say on the question of, and then I'll put that question there. Should the opinions of others affect our own choices or destinies? So now I know that this is more specific to what my kids need to do. My success criteria is more narrowed down. And now I'm thinking, okay, if they're going to have to identify textual evidence to support their claim on this question, what am I going to have to teach them so that I can come up with that learning intention for them? Like really, like what are they learning here? So one thing we want to do, again, so to draw evidence, right? Like that's the whole idea of the standards. So they have to learn to draw that evidence. So I am learning to, I'll say pick or choose, so it's more kid friendly maybe. Choose evidence. Choose details from a text. Well, actually, you can just say from Romeo and Juliet if you really want to be more specific. I'm learning to choose details from, I'll just say a text though, from a literary text to support my, we can say claims or opinions on a given prompt. Okay, so now we know, like, they've been given this prompt and they're going to have to actually go choose, and I probably should choose relevant details. So these details that they choose are going to be relevant because that's going to be their evidence to support their opinion, which is their claim on this question. So let's just say like we're going to stop there and have this learning intention, like, hey, we're going to be using this, but let's think about like what else could we possibly put, because we're actually developing these claims here. So we want to think about like, what are you doing with developing claims? Like, what does that actually mean to develop this claim? So here you're going to say like, you know, I can choose, or maybe actually, I can support my claims with valid evidence, valid textual evidence. Okay, so in one's place, they're just picking and identifying that evidence, right? And then now it's like, well, I've got this evidence, but I'm going to use it to support my claims that I've made. Like this claim is going to support some view that I hold. So we're going to look at them being able to do that. And that means they're learning that. So let's go back over here to I'm learning. And so I am learning to justify my claims with valid reasoning from the text. So, or valid details chosen from the text. Maybe we'll say that instead. Valid details chosen from a text, from a literary text. Keep the language the same as post. So from a literary text. All right, so now we have these two we have this learning intention for them, but it's also a teaching intention, because we need to go ahead and teach them how to choose these relevant details to support their opinion for this prompt. Like, how are they going to go about doing that? And they've been building these evidence logs, but maybe we want to make sure that their evidence logs are sufficient for what they need to do, and how are they going to use them to support their claims. So we just right now identifying some success criteria and some learning intentions, but we really haven't got the plan actually yet because we don't know our direct instruction just yet. So we have these learning progressions we're also supposed to fill out, and looking at what the kids have to do. So part of it is they're going to, I'm going to put a little bullet, like they're going to have to already know, I know what details are important to the, I'll say I know how to identify relevant details. I know how to identify relevant details. So that we're expecting that they already know how to extract details that would be relevant to this question. Like, we shouldn't have to teach them necessarily what would matter necessarily. So we're going to say we are assuming that they can identify relevant details in a text. Another thing they'd have to be already able to do that we don't want to have to reteach for this is they have to be able to form a claim. So I know how to make a claim about or in response to a prompt. So they can answer a question with their opinion already, which is what we want them to do. So we're not teaching them how to answer a question. This is something that's part of the progression that they should have in their wheelhouse already. But if we see that someone doesn't know how to make a claim, we're going to have to think about that. So this is like making sure ahead of time, like we're assuming you know this, but if not, this is a point to get help. Also, they probably want to know how to, I know how to use details to prove my points. So I know how to use details to prove my points. I'll say textual details. All right, so these are some things like they'd have to be able to do, like I can identify this because it proves my point here. So they're not, we're just like, hey, which ones are more, I guess actually we said they're learning to choose relevant details, and knowing how to identify relevant details is actually a part of what they're learning. So we're going to change that one to just saying, I know how to, maybe they shouldn't have, I'm learning to choose relevant details from a literary text to support my opinions on a given prompt. So I'm going to say, they probably, so we can't say they are, that's part of the progression because it is what they're learning. We're going to say they, but I think they have to know, I guess, which key details. So we'll say, I'm learning how to identify key details in a literary text, or they already know how to do some. Like they have to have some idea where these important ones would be, but maybe choosing which ones are specifically important for their prompt is more what they're learning. So we're going to say they can identify some key details in a literary text already. All right. And then we have these moments for discourse, which we're thinking like, what are they going to talk about? And so I like a good talk about things related to the prompt and everything like that. But we still have this warm up here that would give them an opportunity, like in responding to the warm up, they can turn and talk about the warm up answer already. So one thing might be, hey, like just to revisit this question, because we want to think like, do we know what our answer is to this? So one thing with this question, it has, should the opinions of others affect our own choices or destinies? So I don't want to flat out ask this question, but I'm going to bring it up here and paste it really quick so I can look at it and think about it. Because what I'm thinking is we're talking about opinions, right? And we also have in here affect our choices or destinies. So I might say something like, in 5 or more sentences, examine or discuss Discuss ways Romeo or Juliet were impacted by a specific character's opinion. All right. So now they've got to think a little bit, right? It's like, oops. It's like maybe they've already discussed this, so I haven't been in the class to know. So maybe throughout, but now we're still warming up to think about this evidence, right? So the whole idea here is like we got to talk about what details would support an answer to this question that opinions of others affect our own choices, or should they affect our own choices? Like in here, we got to tie it back to Romeo and Juliet. So in examining whether or not other people's opinions should affect our choices, they should probably think about in what ways these characters have been already impacted by allowing people's opinions to sway them, or whether or not that has actually been the case. So it's like, so getting them warmed up and thinking like, what are the ways that Romeo and Juliet have actually been impacted by specific characters? Like not just all the characters so vaguely, like, yeah, they were impacted by these views. Like, who was it exactly? So this is going to narrow them down to actually more specific evidence. And it's also going to jumpstart that lesson in a way that would basically get them on task for what we need to do. So we've got the warm up. So what we could say is for the first discourse opportunity is students will discuss their response to the warm up. Discuss, turn and talk to discuss their responses to the warm up and take out their evidence logs to see if they need to add to them based on their conversation. So if they're like, hey man, you just said something really good, I better add that to my evidence log, this would be a good opportunity for them to do that and go ahead and pull those things out. So in the direct instruction, here we're like, okay, well, we have to teach them about being able to choose relevant details. And those details really need to come back to this question about the opinions of others. So one thing I like to do now is go ahead and encourage people to check out AI. And just to take a look, I prefer Gemini, Google's Gemini AI, but I'm using this to specifically say if I haven't taught, let me log in with it only works with your non-CCSD account, unfortunately. But if you haven't taught Romeo and Juliet for some time, or you're new to teaching Romeo and Juliet, and so you don't maybe specifically have a really good grasp of all these maybe tiny details that might help the kids answer this question, one thing you could specifically do is go ahead and use AI. And I like to co-cross or cross compare. So ChatGPT, right? I take them and I'll open them both. So I got my Gemini, I got my ChatGPT. And what I do is say something like, okay, so I got this question here. Okay, so I'll say, help me identify areas or specific details, specific details in the text of Romeo and Juliet that would help 9th grade English students respond to this question. And I'm going to also say, provide explanation on how the details would help support their response. All right, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to put it here in Gemini, and I'm going to stick it over here also in ChatGPT. And we're going to see what the AI people have to say about this. All right, so in one response over here, let me click out of this. And also, I'm just going to quickly make sure that it looks like we're good. All right, so, and let me make this a bit bigger real quick. So I'm going to do this. Just focus on, I guess that's as big as it gets. Sorry. All right, so, okay, so over here, Gemini, what I was showing is it's got this. So it says, that's a fantastic question for ninth graders. Exploring how external opinions influence Romeo and Juliet's choices and ultimate fate is a powerful way to engage with the play's themes. Here are some specific textual details and explanations that can help your students formulate their responses. So now it's giving us textual details and explanation, the feud between the Montagues and Capulets. So it's saying the constant references to the ancient grudge, and has prologue Tybalt's immediate aggression towards Romeo and at the Capulet feast. This by his voice should be a Montague. Fetch me my rapier, boy. So, and the prince's repeated warnings about the consequences of further violence. So we see this textual details. Now it's giving us the explanation. This deep-seated societal conflict dictates many of Romeo and Juliet's actions. Their families' opinions and expectations create an environment of hatred that forces their love into secrecy and ultimately contributes to their tragic end. Students can argue that external pressures directly shape their destinies, making free choice nearly impossible. Oh, interesting from this. Anyways, so what I'm taking from this as a teacher is that, hey, okay, the opinions that of the two families, their rivaling opinions and views of each other, did those opinions impact Romeo and Juliet? And if so, how so? And so the question also is, should the opinions? So in looking at this, I would say as a teacher, we'd have to examine the effect and impact of people's opinions to determine whether or not those opinions should have some control or effect. So if we should these opinions affect our choices, and if not, so in doing so, what's been the impact? What's been the impact of Romeo and Juliet allowing the opinions of others to affect their choices, and to what extent did they allow other characters to impact their choices or destiny? So that's one thing I feel like I need to teach them to be able to do. So we're going to teach them to reframe this prompt. So, teacher will explain how students can reframe their prompt to ensure they are collecting, or I'll say identifying the most relevant details to support their claims. And then, maybe you want the other E, ensure. Okay, and so in here, I also might put in here as a question and say, for example, or I just might put in there the question and say, in what ways did Romeo and Juliet act based upon other people's opinions, and what were the outcomes? What were the outcomes of them doing so? So now, if we have this, it's like now we're looking at find this evidence. Like, where are these? Where places in the play? And sorry, my dogs are going off off right in the background. They're going off. But in what ways did Romeo and Juliet act based on the people's opinions? Like, where are those answers? So where in the text do we see Romeo and Juliet doing this, acting on someone else's opinion? Because we need that in our evidence log. So maybe we're saying, hey, they tried to hide their relationship because of their parents' opinion. So in trying to be secretive based upon their parents' opinions, they were hiding. And in doing so, what happened there? So there's some teaching here that we can now do. It's like we're going to guide our students through seeing this prompt in this different light or this other way of looking at it, so we can make sure that the evidence we're actually getting is going to be responsive to the claims or the question that we really need to answer. So it's all relevant. So in doing so, now we're understanding how we're going to choose relevant details, because we're going to be explaining these details. We'll have to answer this question. Like if it doesn't support an answer to this question, then it's probably not going to be relevant for what we're trying to do here. So, and now we've got that going on. They also need to learn how to justify their claims with valid details. So we're going to also make sure that we're gonna be guiding them through this discussion. So we might actually take this learning intention here, because it's going to be enough of the first lesson to get that. Hey, what details are we getting, right? And then we might bring this second one down to this other one. So now we got this second learning intention. That I'm learning to do that, and I'm going to also go ahead and take this here and make that down here as this success criteria, because that'll be the second part of the block where we really talk about this more. So I'm going to justify my claims with valid evidence. I can support my claims with valid textual evidence. So basically down in that part, we'll have more of a discussion like, hey, what are our answers to this? But for now, we've got this part where we're like, okay, we're going to have to talk about reframing this prompt so we can make sure our evidence is in line with actually truly addressing the prompt question. Another point for discourse here is, so it's another turn and talk opportunity. And one thing might just be to go ahead and say, show me, so turn and talk, show me your evidence that shows what do we want? Times when Romeo and Juliet acted based on others' opinions. So now they can, opinions. Now they can go ahead and just talk about that again. Like, what do you got? What do you have on your evidence log? So we can keep going with that, and they can, discuss and see where people were at. You can call on people out loud, of course. And this is more, so this turn and talk opportunity is going to be after this guided practice. It says it's right here in your lesson plan, but really it's going to be after you give them time for guided practice. You're going to do this turn and talk. So the guided practice, like we've done you walk them through how to do it. Now we're going to go ahead and say, students will, and we want them to go back through the play and choose, let's say, at least maybe 5 examples or 4 examples. Let's see how many. Let's go back to our notes over here in Gemini really quick. Let's get some more stuff. So we have Tybalt's strong opinion, which is kind of mentioned above. Friar Lawrence's advice and action. So it has Friar Lawrence's decisions to secretly marry Romeo and Juliet. His plan involving this portion of reliance on a messenger who fails to deliver crucial information, all demonstrate how the opinions of others wanting to end the feud and his own judgment influenced the lover's fate. Friar's attempts to help, although well-intentioned, highlight the opinions and plans of others can have unintended and devastating consequences on individual lives. So students can analyze whether Friar's interference was helpful or harmful. And I don't think that students would actually think that Friar Lawrence interjected his opinion. So we'd have to actually have a discussion of like whether or not Friar Lawrence had an opinion. And if so, how did his opinion come into play? So maybe they'd be like, well, Friar Lawrence obviously thought that these two should be married, that Romeo and Juliet should be married, and in doing so, he helped them out. So had his opinion not been there, or had they not known his opinion, how might things have been different? So, and you can have that conversation. So again, that would be like direct instruction when you lead them through these things to talk about. The nurses shifting opinions, advice to Juliet, Paris's role in the Capulet's desire for marriage, Romeo's reaction to banishment and the news of Juliet's death. So it's like, it says you can provide concrete evidence. These specific examples to text give students tangible evidence to support their arguments. All right, let's go over to ChatGPT and see what they got. They also have great question. Romeo and Juliet full examples where the opinions of others directly impact the choices and fates of characters, which make it a perfect text to explore that essential question. Here are the 4 key details from the play. So ChatGPT is giving us 4 key details and along with some explanations. So let's go ahead and take a look at those 4 details. The feud between the Montague and Capulet. Jim and I said the same thing. Explanation here is the family feud creates an environment where Romeo and Juliet must hide their love, so that those people's opinions are forcing them into that secrecy. Got that from Gemini. Juliet's relationship with her parents. I'll tell thee, get thee to church, oh Thursday, or never have to look at me in the face, Capulet. Juliet's father pressures her to marry Paris, disregarding her feelings. His opinion about what's best for her leads Juliet to desperation and deception. This could support the idea that allowing others' opinions to control our destiny can cause inner conflict and poor outcomes. All right, so again, a good teaching moment. Like if you didn't think of this yourself because you're not really like that into the play, I think this would help lead you through some of that directed instruction. Romeo's influence from Friar Lawrence, text detail, wisely and slow. Oh, they're also mentioning Friar Lawrence. So apparently that is Friar Lawrence must be some evidence because both ChatGPT and Gemini mentioned Friar Lawrence. So you should probably engage in that discussion with them, like how Friar Lawrence's opinions impact the characters. So Friar Lawrence warns Romeo to take his relationship with Juliet slowly, yet still agrees to marry them quickly in secret. His mixed guidance shapes their choices and fate. Students might discuss whether listening to respected adults is always wise or whether individuals should trust their own judgment. I like that one. Then it also has peer pressure from Mercutio and Tybalt. Oh, calm, dishonorable, vile submission. Mercutio mocks Romeo for avoiding a fight with Tybalt, pushing Romeo into violence. Oh, that was there. Romeo's choice to duel is influenced by peer pressure, setting off a chain of tragic events. Students can analyze how peers' opinions can sway actions in harmful ways. So this one gives final thoughts for students. Ask them to think, are there times when others' opinions are valuable and should guide, e.g. wisdom from adults? And are there times when they lead us away from what's right for us? So I really like that, and I'm going to take it. So I feel like that's a good turn in talk. And I think it would be in line with what they should do here. So I'm going to put that down here in the discourse. Turn in talk. And here is that question. And I think that's a great way to get them thinking about the next part of like backing up their claims, because here is a claim. And that's, you might also even think about like this question is helping them answer that. Student, the one up here, what is our prompt there? Should the opinions of others affect our own choices or destinies? So now we want to come back to that claim. So in our directed instruction 2, we're going to, so teacher will lead students in a discussion to determine their claim to the prompt. Oops. So back to that prompt. I'm going to come back to it. So we got their evidence. Now we want to see them looking at our evidence here. What does the evidence really help us support a view of? So we got teacher will lead students in discussion to determine their claim to the prompt. Should the opinions of others affect our own choices or destiny? Students, specifically, teacher will help students analyze their evidence to determine what claim is supported. It's like, okay, so looking at all of the stuff we determined, we've got this turn and talk part 2. Like, so ultimately it's like we determine maybe there are times when people's opinions are valuable, and we should allow people's opinions to actually affect our choices to an extent, but maybe not always, right? So maybe we shouldn't completely disregard the opinions of people, but there is a certain extent to which we should be allowing that influence to extend. And so that's the whole discussion that will help these kids do that, because they have to learn to justify their claims with valid details, right? So it's like, well, looking at these details, are your claims justified? Like, what are these details actually proving? Or what can we say they do prove? So that's really going to be a guided discussion where you would lead them through. Let's look at what we have here. Let's determine if we say, for example, that no, the opinions of others should not affect our destiny. What evidence do we, or our choices, what evidence do we have to now say, like, why are we saying that? Like, what's our because, and what's our because from the text? So that's the whole discussion that we'd have to go ahead and lead our students through, finding that answer. Like, does our evidence actually come from the text, and is it supporting our claim to this answer? So, or to this answer to this question. So another student turn and talk part is, we can say, turn and talk, and does your evidence, or which answer, I don't know if I want to say which claim does your evidence support more? And I'll say that opinions of others should affect our own choices, or not. Okay, so now they can go ahead and actually look and say, what is this actually telling us? And they can do that turn and talk together with the student discourses there, and they're really trying to figure this out. So hang on. The opinions of others, I should say should affect our own choices, or that they should not. All right. So guided practice here. They are learning to justify their claims with valid evidence. I can support my claims with valid textual evidence. I think here is a good point for them to actually begin crafting their thesis statement towards that summative, and really thinking about whether or not they have what they need in that evidence log to get them to a full analysis. And so here I would say students will complete an outline of their thesis statement, filling in their claim and 2 supporting details for their claim. So for example, if they say that, that the opinions of others should not affect our own choices, what are their 2 textual supporting details that they're going to use to back that up? Like what from the text would aid in supporting that view? And that would take them back to using their evidence logs as well. So students will complete an outline of their thesis statements, filling in their claim and 2 supporting details. So like that's what I want from them. Like give me that. What is your thesis statement going to look like? What supporting details from this evidence log will get there? And if you don't have those, then you need to continue working on your evidence log and making sure that it does have details for this. If your instruction hasn't gotten to the point where they've been really consistently working on these evidence logs, the second part might instead be that, students are going to be led in discussing like, hey, do you have enough evidence to answer this? And if not, let's go back and you guys will use your guided practice time to go identify more evidence to get this done. And so in closure, I would say, out loud discussion, or so quick class discussion. What is the verdict? Are we leaning towards saying yes, allow others' opinions, or the opinions of others to influence our choices, or not, or no? So where's the class at with that? Okay, and that's what I would do for this lesson plan. So I have to come up here. I forgot to put all this stuff in. It looks like, how to get the students. All right, so back to the guided practice up here. So our first one was they're going to be looking at getting their choosing their relevant details. So I would say students will update their evidence logs with details that specifically help them I'll say specifically relate to the revised prompt, so that they're really thinking about that. Like, what do we have there? And I can even put this down here just to remind myself of what I'm talking about. So that's there. And they'll do that. Transition is going to be students will volunteer to share some evidence they have collected. I'll say share with the whole class. So everyone's going to hear, take a turn and go ahead and do some out loud turn and talks, really. The learning progressions for this part of the plan. So we have, I can support my claims with valid textual evidence, and I'm learning to justify my claims. So I just think, obviously, I think it's like very similar to what was initially, is I can state a claim. I can identify details related to my claim and a text, and I can read with understanding. Part of that is they really do have to be able to read this play. So there. So that's there. All right, we got these turn and talks. We have our teacher stuff. We have the kids talking. We have their guided practice. This lesson plan is done. All right, so that's that's how I would approach it, like me personally. Um, but there's still some more things that are like not here that you want to think about. So like more like, those like differentiation and scaffolding opportunities. So when you are thinking about like the kids who are already here, like what are we going to do to beef up their engagement? Like if they already have this answered, they've got all their details, they're ready to go. What else could we do? So in thinking about that, there might just be some things where you keep notes in your own lesson planning, like as far as like if the kids already have their great evidence, you might be like, go ahead, maybe you want to start working on your counterclaim. So while these kids are already identifying their details, what evidence can you have to support a rebuttal for anything that other kids might have already as a counterclaim to your argument? So that way they're doing something a little bit more than just waiting around if they're already ready. So that's also part of my planning, and that is that. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that and wrap it up here, as this is about almost an hour long for you to watch. So that's that. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to give the video a like, and the Stop by Zarina's art on Etsy.